PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. I'm going to show you another game played in the Sicilian Kalashnikov, and this was sent in by a regular viewer of the channel, Kevin Glosser. Thanks very much to him, who is a frequent exponent of this opening and has turned into a bit of a fan of the Kalashnikov. He seems to be getting pretty good results with it, and this is a really nice illustration of some of Black's strategic ideas in the opening. So here we go. Let's take a look. So this was a 10-minute game played online. So we can forgive some of the moves that were made. But still, I think it's very worthwhile looking at this game. So after e5, I like this move because it challenges white straight away. And in fact, most of these knight moves, they don't give white any advantage at all. So straight away, you're testing white here. Knight b5, in my opinion, is the only serious move for black. The only one that challenges black. And then after d6, this is the so-called Kalashnikov variation. Already we have an unusual position, because that knight is somewhat misplaced and has to kind of recycle. And in this game, Kevin's opponent played c4. The other main line is knight 1 c3, but c4 was always thought to be the principled way of playing the opening for white, because it clamps the d5 square. But there is a big drawback, namely that the d4 square has been somewhat weakened. Let's bear that in mind. So bishop e6. So this basically follows the main line of that I give in the book. There you go, King's Kalashnikov Sicilian, and also it's the chessbook course as well. And this is a very important move. It gives black really dynamic counterplay. In the old days, this bishop used to play to e7 and to g5, which isn't bad actually. But g6 is a very dynamic way of playing, because very often this bishop is let loose on the long diagonal, even though it looks blocked at the moment. And knight f6 is an important move. There were a few games that went with knight e7, but actually on f6, this is far more active. As we're going to see, this gives black very interesting options. So bishop e3, this is one of the main lines. And white can play this in several different ways. Very often this knight is brought back here to cover the d4 square, which is logical. The only thing is, once the knight goes back to c2, then it's easier to get a hit on this pawn. One can just play queen d2 in this position, but if white doesn't play knight c2, then knight d4 is always an option. But in this game, white played f3 to support the e-pawn. And that's often played in this kind of opening, because one of black's strategic aims is to push that pawn to b5, breaking down the centre and maybe distracting a knight, and then this pawn can be vulnerable. I'm speaking in very broad terms here. But f3 is a legitimate move to bolster this pawn, and also sometimes white may want to play knight d5 here, and then the pawn is protected. But there is a drawback to playing f3, as we're about to see. So first of all, rook c8 is played. Yeah, not the only move there. I'm noting that this outpost is available for a knight, but rook c8 is absolutely standard in this variation, putting the rook to the semi-open file. And rook c1. Okay, white wants to bolster the c-pawn. And knight d4. There we go. I think this is a very logical move. If white declines to play knight c2, then why not throw that knight into d4? And if this is taken, well, I mean, black would desperately like white to give up this dark-squared bishop, because all those dark squares are weak. And, well, just have a look at this. Queen takes d4, and black has a devastating move here. And that's knight g4. So attacking the queen, and after queen d2, queen b6, and knight f2 check. That's pretty nasty. And if instead knight d5, then just knight d7. That's pretty good. This bishop is going to come into the game, and yeah, these dark squares are incredibly weak. So that's actually a very nice position for black. Yes, and don't forget this queen can often enter the game on h4. So knight d4 played, so white played queen d2. And Kevin played a really logical move, knight h5. And this is very common when white plays f3, because that blocks the bishop, enabling knight h5. And very often the knight can land on the f4 outpost. I mean, that's quite menacing. But also it makes way for the queen to potentially come to h4. So absolutely typical move. In fact, there's a really nice game played by Anish Giri that I look at in the course and in the book. And I think I've recorded a video on that game actually, so I'll dig out the link at the end. But incidentally, there's another way of playing this position which I think is very interesting for black, which is very similar to this. But first of all, playing h5 and then h4. So, perhaps this pawn might advance again to sort of disturb the king's position. And after h3, then knight h5. And, these squares are pretty weak. So that's another way of playing the position. But knight h5, really strong move. I like it. Actually, when I looked at this up in the database, I found that actually there was a game played in this line previously, from 2024 actually. Gvetadze against Daulita. And white played b3, clearly worried about this pawn. There could be chances to take it like this. So b3 strengthens this pawn chain, but actually it allows black to take the initiative. There's a really nice move. Queen a5, hitting this knight. Knight b1. And then b5. This absolutely typical move when you're fighting against the Morozzi bind. You want to break down that bind with b5. Positionally excellent for black. So that, black basically wants to take here and weaken that pawn, and if this is taken, pawn takes, and again, b4, lovely minority attack. This knight is an absolute beast. But instead of b3, in this game, white played g3 to prevent the knight coming in. But you can see that weakens white's king position. And here Kevin sees the chance to attack with f5. Now, f5 is often quite a contentious move in the Kalashnikov. It's somehow a very natural attacking move, but it can sometimes weaken black's king. In this case, it's incredibly powerful. Black's king is well covered here by these pieces. And f5 starts the process of attacking white's king. Maybe with f4, maybe taking here to get through to the f3 pawn. I mean, white is in trouble here. So, I mean, a sort of natural move here might be king g2. So just, protect these points. But black has such a nice attack here, f4. I just want to show you one variation. Okay, after bishop g1, how do you play here with black? Black to play. Okay. I'll have a drink, you have a think. Cheers. Black can take here and take on g3. Reminds me of the King's Indian, actually. And after king takes, rook f4 is a beautiful move. It just cuts out white pieces from the king side, and then there's queen h4 check, and the king is just getting cut to shreds. So after f5, white took on f5. And here, I think best is to either just take here. Every Russian schoolboy knows to recapture with the knight pawn, as David Bronstein once said. It just looks like a really nice pawn front there. One could also take here first and then take here. Two beautiful bishops. Nice centre, you know, maybe f4. But knight f5, also pretty good. The only thing is when you recapture with a piece, then it gives white potentially a foothold here. In any case, black is still doing extremely well. Bishop f2 was played. It's a blunder. I mean, black could just play bishop h6, winning the exchange. It's really strong. But instead, knight d4 was played. Also a good move. So there's just pressure here. So king g2 and queen d7, threatening a big check on h3. I mean, the threats are just too much here. You can see all these pieces are beautifully active. I mean, every single one of black's pieces actually is in play. It's kind of a dream position. And yes, that d4 outpost is so important. I'll come back to that at the end. White played knight e4. Yeah, I mean, that's where you want the knight really, on a secure post there. But actually, after bishop h3 check, it's gone. Takes, and you could just play knight takes f3, but Kevin got a bit flashy. He played rook takes f3, and why not? Looks like a really strong move. It is a really strong move. So black is the exchange up and is crashing through to the king side. I mean, I suppose comparatively best is to take here, but after these exchanges, I mean, black obviously has a winning position with an extra exchange and a continuing initiative, basically. But in the game, bishop takes, knight takes, and the queen had gone, and the rest of the game was simply mopping up. I'll just play through to the end. And queen h3. The white king isn't going to survive that one. Really nice game. So just take a look at that knight. That beautiful knight on d4. And that just causes havoc in white's position. It's hitting the bishop. It's hitting that pawn. By extension, because that bishop is menaced, then this pawn is a little bit vulnerable as well. And if this is taken, then that bishop on g7 just is such a strong piece. So, yes, pawn to c4 is kind of the principled move because it clamps the d5 square. Nevertheless, there is a massive drawback that it weakens d4, and in this game, the knight hops in. So there we go. If you want to learn more about the opening, then do check out my Chessable course on the Sicilian Kalashnikov, and the book version is pretty good as well. You can get them both from, well, you can get the book from New in Chess, and you can get the course from Chessable, of course. So well played to Kevin.